welcome to Homegrown, Ways Forward for Domestic Enrolments. I'm Tim Winkler from Future Campus, and we're really looking forward to diving into this discussion today on the future of the domestic student market. As we get underway, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we all meet, work, live and play today. I'm logging in from Yorta country and would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, today's discussion comes at a really critical time for the sector. It's at a time we're on the cusp of what could be the most significant reform of higher education in a generation. Or maybe it's just yet another plan that adds to a list of, is it 8, 9 reforms since we had the Dawkins innovations here, and it won't get enough funding to go anywhere. So it will be really interesting to see where it goes, particularly post-budget, as presumably the first parts of the Accord process are revealed. But the central premise of the Accord is that equity students from low SES backgrounds, from regional areas, students with Indigenous heritage and students with a disability are really the key to growing a strong, qualified Australian workforce. The future of the whole Australian workforce is really at stake here. We're talking about growing a workforce so that there's an expectation that 4 out of every 5 workers will need either a vet qualification or a degree by 2050. And many of those will come from these underrepresented cohorts. So there's a lot to discuss. We have a wealth of experience here today on the panel to discuss with 2 eminent and experienced Chief Marketing Officers, Kathy Vozella from ACU and Dean Gould from Southern Cross University. Welcome.
Thanks, Tim.
Now, Dean, we'll start with you. The future of the Australian economy is at stake. But the Accord is based on the assumption that there's queues of equity students which are going to form as soon as we throw open the doors. Have we done enough analysis to know if they're really going to come?
Yeah, look, Tim, it's a really good question. Thank you for that. And thanks for the opportunity today to be part of this conversation. Let me start by saying that I'm a bit of a fan of the Accord. I think it's a noble document, and I think its intention and its analysis is really good. However, one thing I think is clear to me is that it's largely based about what Australia needs. I don't think it's a student-centric document. It's a macroeconomic document. And from that point of view, this is more than just about access. So if there's making university education accessible to students is a good thing. However, there's other reasons why students choose not to go to university, and there's a whole cultural and societal issues that I don't think have really been addressed through this. And there's even whether there's the belief that university will deliver or the cynicism that it won't. Those sort of things are not addressed by this. So I really don't believe that higher education is a build it and they will come. You have to give them a value proposition. Spoken like a true marketer. There you go. And the other thing that I think is really important is that if you're talking about particularly regional and remote opportunities, if there's no professional outlet within those opportunities, you're actually asking those people to leave their communities. There might be either very few or even no engineers or doctors or nurses or other professional pursuits. So if you're in a really small community or a community that doesn't have those professional outlets, or only just a few of them, you're actually saying, do this higher education course, become a professional, be educated, fantastic on face value, but then you have to leave your community. I don't think that's been addressed.
Just on that, Dean, a follow-up question before we go to Kathy. As you said, you're in a regional university. If the Australian government decides to start paying more for regional students, is there a concern that that could suck more students out of your catchment area and actually be a disadvantage for a regional university?
That's a really interesting question. There is no doubt that across Australia there is a really strong urban drift, particularly amongst younger people. They finish their schoolings or their first couple of years of work and they take an opportunity to go away. And you can see almost almost every regional town in Australia has this demographic graph where the 18 to 40-year-olds are the lowest population segment of the life cycle. So they go away, but they invariably come back and to raise their kids, and that cycle continues again. So that trend already exists. So if there's more incentive to push people towards the cities, then I think we would see more of that, yes.
Now, I should add, please submit your questions through the Q&A if you'd like to ask questions of Dean or Kathy as we go, and I'll aim to moderate those and grab those as they come through. Kathy, ACU has worked really hard over decades to attract students from a social justice values perspective to get these equity groups, to get people who are from low income groups, people with disabilities, Indigenous students, and so on. What do we have to do? What has to change if you want to double enrolments from these cohorts?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It is a very ambitious target that's been set in the Accord. And I think I agree with what Dean said in relation to the Accord, that it's not a very student-centric document. And as a marketer, we always would look at the market needs and wants, the analysis of the market. There are many reasons why the equity groups that you mentioned are underrepresented in universities at the moment. And it's not just because universities haven't effectively recruited them. So I think it's a lot more complicated than just doing more marketing. And we really need more data and more insights to deeply understand this market. And it's a tricky one to understand. At ACU, we have tried to, we have a university-wide widening participation agenda, and we have tried to understand the specific needs of these groups, and it's difficult to target them. I mean, many low SES students don't identify as such, for example. So, you know, it's really hard to sort of concentrate on that particular cohort. But nevertheless, we do need to look at the data and more analysis of the barriers and all the reasons why, you know, and a lot of money has been pumped into the HEP program, etc., over many years. I think fundamentally, and not only for this group of students, we absolutely, universities absolutely have to get the product suite right. So it doesn't really matter how much money you throw at marketing if the students don't want to do the courses that you've got on offer, if the courses aren't aligned, if they're not contemporary, if there's not the professional opportunities, etc. It's not going to make much of a difference. We need to make sure that all of our pathways articulate into our degrees properly. We need to make sure that the support is in place for these students so that they can be successful. We've got to sort of align all this with employment opportunities and opportunities in those regional areas, as Dean was talking about before. I think fundamentally what we know as marketers, we need to be responsive to the market. And for this particular challenge, that's no different. So one particular example, and I know you're not necessarily wanting me to talk about what ACU's been doing, but just one example, in my career, I've only ever had one opportunity to be involved in establishing a brand new campus. And that was when ACU set up Blacktown, our campus at Blacktown. And it's only a small campus. It was in partnership with Blacktown City Council. But we had a real opportunity to deeply connect with that local community to find out what they needed and wanted from a university, what the barriers were. I went out and spoke to dozens of local careers advisors. We ran focus groups in the community. We talked to prospective students. I mean, fundamentally, I know Blacktown is a suburb of Sydney, which is obviously a metropolitan area. But to deeply connect with them and find out what what were the barriers and what were the drivers for them, we discovered that they very much, many of them just wanted to stay local. So, you know, they could go to university at many other places in Sydney. Even that train or bus ride away is taking them away from their family commitments and responsibilities or their employment responsibilities. So I really do think we need to think more about those local opportunities for students. And the fact that we were able to almost build this new campus around what that community needs, like that's a very rare opportunity, and also something that is difficult to do on a much larger scale, obviously. But it was a really good example of how you can be really focused on the needs of a particular community and be quite effective in doing so.
And so did that result in good enrolments as a result of all that preparation? Because this is a great case study of, you know, is this what we all need to start thinking about?
Yeah, Blacktown is doing very well for us, and it continues to thrive, and the partnership with the council continues to thrive. And the students there in the first couple of years, they've been the most satisfied. Great student satisfaction scores, great retention of those students as well. So, you know, Blacktown is doing really, really well. And because it's a small campus for us, we've been able to pilot what we call an ACU Thrive program for first year students to really help them to transition to university, to sort of manage their academic life as well as their social and personal demands. And that program, which we piloted in Blacktown very successfully, is now being rolled out to the wider university for first years. But I think, yes, we have had great success with Blacktown and looking forward to continued success there.
Oh, it's really interesting because I've heard of the Blacktown campus appearing, but I hadn't heard of how it had gone in terms of enrolment. So that's really good. There's a question through the Q&A from the audience, and this relates to something that I wanted to ask you both. What role do you see online playing in helping students stay in their local area? And secondly, you've articulated with Blacktown the idea of a small campus. We've also heard from the federal government of their love of study hubs. What's the mix that's going to work? Do we need all those things? And you know, what's going to work when? And so let's start with online, and if you can both give me your thoughts on that.
I think, if it's okay if I go first, Dean, we do get really strong regional uptake of online programs at ACU. But one of the things that we need to remember, particularly with this, the equity cohort, is access to good Wi-Fi and the equipment that they need to be able to study online. And as a sector, I think we need to really think about the student experience that our online students are getting. Many of them do feel quite isolated. It's much harder for them to connect and have, you know, the sort of student experience that on-campus students get and form those relationships and access the support and services, etc. That's not to say that they can't access that. I think most of those services are available online as well. But I think the support for equity students, particularly in the first year, are critical to them being successful, whether they're online or on campus.
Yeah, I think the student experience is the central pillar of how that's going to work. We teach a little bit differently at Southern Cross University. We have 6-week terms, and students do two units or 2 subjects per 6 weeks across the year. So what we have found is a bit of a surge in online since we've moved into that teaching model, the Southern Cross model, as they call it. And we see that attention span, or that 6-week period, is far more digestible for online students. And interestingly, we even have quite a number of online students who are within our campus catchment. So location, it's not necessarily that somebody wants to, you know, live in the hills and study online. It might just be their particular work situation, family situation, domestic situation, where they online is their best option. How we support those people through their study experience is actually really, really critical. And we are now experimenting with, you know, like hybrid classrooms where the online experience and the classroom experience is a melded experience. And that seems to be resonating really well. I can see down the track where the online studies are far more choreographed and scripted environment, almost like a film production. And that's meets quite a lot of resistance from people with real sort of passion around the subject area. But the as Marshall McLuhan said, the message is the medium. So
it's which brings me back to something that Kathy raised earlier, the importance of matching product with person, if you like, and making sure that there are courses taught that students want and in a way that they want to receive. Dean, how do you go as a CMO? A lot of people in your position sometimes get shut out of that product conversation, if you like, the course delivery and the course mode. Other times, and of course, I'm not asking you to divulge all those tricky conversations, but just as a general rule, how does that go? Is there a place for you in those conversations?
Yeah, most definitely. Like I've worked at a couple of universities and they've both been very embracing of the marketing lens on a course proposal or something like that. And I think that's really important because you bring anything from a keyword search around a particular inquiry through to a competitive analysis and the market scanner. So that's really simple stuff, and you can keep going even deeper if you need to. So I think there has definitely been an embracing of what's the world external to the university saying about this potential course. And there's been some times when we've said actually it's just not, I just can't see the market. And that's been taken on board, or we can get really excited and say, we think we can, sell this ice to Eskimos, sort of thing. So.
And then also following up from Kathy's discussion about Blacktown, what's your thoughts on study hub versus new small campus? What's the difference? If you get down to a very small campus, is that just like a study hub?
Well, a study hub historically has been a place which is brings together regional students of any institution. And I think that has a lot of merit and it works really well in many parts of Australia. The country university centres have got a long track record of providing that facility for students, and some of them are more successful than others. But overall, it provides a opportunity for like-minded students from across different disciplines and different institutions to gather together, and they've got a central place for study. Again, they might have a situation where they need somewhere quiet and academic environment to do their studies or their research or their assignments, and the study hub can do that. The difference with a small campus is that it belongs to that institution and it's part of that institution's culture and that sort of thing. So on one hand, you have a lot more convenience in a study hub, but with a small campus, and we've got a few of them, is that you have a lot more ownership around it and a lot more culture around it and a lot more vested interest in that student experience.
And just while we're on that, Dean, then looking at the Accord and what it's asking, what are the advantages and opportunities that you're seeing for regional universities that are set up like Southern Cross?
Look, if you certainly go with the glass half full approach, this could be a potentially great opportunity. I mean, you look at many of the rural and regional areas that our universities operate in. If you look at the attainment rates, and there's a lot in the Accord around attainment rates. Like across Australia, we've hit all the Bradley Report attainment rates, at a macro level, and now we want to go to 55% of the young population having a degree. But if you look at the regional areas, we operate in some areas that have attainment rates at half that. 23%, 25%. So there is a real upside. There's still a whole swath of that community, and you can assume that that community is no different to any other community. There's a whole swath of that community who have the potential to have a university education. So I think there's a real opportunity there to build the attainment rates and the experience of university right across that community. And we pride ourselves on our first in family approach. That's people who have a first in their family to attain a university degree. We have a large number of those people, and if that approach gets momentum behind it at a national scale, that's pretty life-changing for people and for those communities.
Something that strikes me as you both are talking is the question about market, if you like. So we have a competitive market-based approach to universities and how they're structured. Everyone competes for students, for research dollars, and for staff. Is there a bit of a market failure here? I'm hearing lessons from Southern Cross. I'm hearing lessons from ACU. I'm sure there are numerous other universities sharing lessons. Is there much cross-pollination of this has really worked? Because at the moment, it looks like there's a lot of activity going on in individual institutions, but not necessarily a great meshing across the divide.
Tim, that was one of the things that I was going to raise today is no. The short answer is there's probably not. While universities collaborate with each other on a range of other things, the marketing teams are very competitive, and we're all friendly and so on, but people keep things very close to their chest. And let's face it, we are competing for the same students here, and the competition is quite fierce. As a result, we end up seeing, a lot of regions have a whole bunch of universities going in there trying to attract their share of those equity students, while other areas are probably getting not much attention whatsoever. And I think there could be and should be, and probably the only way that we will have any chance of getting close to those lofty targets is to collaborate more and work together. And I'm not sure what that looks like exactly. I don't know whether we need to sort of work out territories. I mean, that just sounds a bit weird, or ways that we can sort of come together. I think it just comes down to putting the student first. And if we keep a focus on that, and I know that's what the widening participation agenda was designed to do, but I think, and that gives the long-term engagement that is really needed to raise awareness and raise aspirations for university study. But for us, I think there's more collaboration with each other. There's more collaboration with TAFE, with RTOs, with industry, employers, and other organisations required to really think outside the box and develop some innovative solutions.
Yeah, look, Kathy's nailed it. I think that's that sort of marketing environment is really, really competitive, and I think Australia's really blessed in that there are no bad universities. Like, we've got 40-odd universities, and they're all pretty good. Some are world ranked, and others are still really, really strong. So it's not like the potential student is choosing between chalk and cheese here. They're all really competitive, and we actually are dealing in a sector that measures growth by single-digit percents. So it's really, really ruthless in some respects, not in behaviour, but certainly in vying for market share. It's pretty combative at some times. So there's probably great opportunity for collaboration if that was possible to get behind these lofty targets.
So, Dean, I'll ask you this. There's another question from the floor. How do we manage the fact that realistically not everyone should go to university is the question. Trades are calling out for workers, so many jobs at the moment that don't need a tertiary level of qualification. Of course, there's a lot of discussion about, is AI going to change 40% of jobs and so on. But overall, how do we manage that issue, university versus TAFE, other issues?
Yeah, I think that's a really lively question to be debated, and it's examined pretty extensively in the Accord. And I think what's going to have to happen is that we see a lot of universities experimenting with micro-credentials. We've had MOOCs for 10, 12 years now, so those micro-credentials, I can see a scenario where they are AQF approved, stepping stones or scaffoldings towards high degrees, or even towards a diploma or a certificate course. And that separation between vocation and higher education and skills training, that's going to have to blur. That's really clear so let me say it's really clear in the intention of the Accord. Whether that becomes a reality or not, that's something that the sector's going to have to work through. But it's pretty clear that we're going to have to find a way that those different levels of skills development, skills education become part of the whole, rather than, and you see it yourself, universities versus TAFE. I mean, that's almost a 20th century position, really.
Absolutely. Kathy, any thoughts on that, and the future of that blurring between the sectors, or seamless connection is really what the Accord's looking for. Do you think that's a reality?
I think it would be nice. I think we would all agree that university is not for everyone, and we certainly need more trades but I think we do need to look at lifelong education opportunities. We see many examples of people going into trades and then wanting to further study later on, or vice versa. Having a higher education or a tertiary education that is more, is flexible to that, is good. And I think more micro-credentials and opportunities for people to dip in and out of study to upskill throughout their career is really important. Something universities aren't great at is being agile and nimble to respond to those opportunities and changing market needs. It takes a while to get from a course concept through to an actual approved course that can go to market. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of work that goes into that. Obviously, there's important quality assurance measures along the way, and I'm not saying we should do away with that. But I do think that we do need to find ways to be more agile to market. And I think the vet sector is often much better at that, able to get something up and running pretty quickly and turn on a dime in response to, changing priorities.
On the demand side of the equation, Kathy, there's obvious options with if there is a higher per student fee for students from these so-called equity groups. There'll be options to offer scholarships. There'll be sort of additional support potential. What else can universities offer practically if we have to start gearing up? And it's a pretty rapid gearing up if the whole sector is going to double in size, even in the term available.
Yeah. I mean, scholarships are important. And we see some universities offering really big scholarships to these to equity students. But not all students want to travel to the city. And, there is a lot of expense around that. Sometimes the scholarships will cover it and sometimes not. They've got to pay for accommodation and food and, whatever. But particularly those students who are doing courses that require placements, and, who may have to travel to go to those placements, that's another cost altogether. And it's great to see the Accord acknowledging that. I've heard someone in my team talk about, placement poverty. It's a reality, and it can be a detriment to studying. So, not all universities are able to offer the types of scholarships that are going to cover all of that. And I think we do need to think more about how we support students with the cost of living pressures of actually doing that type of thing. A lot of the courses that, where we need more students in nursing and teaching, which, we wouldn't have been saying probably 5 years ago, this is a real problem that we're seeing for many of them now, and we have a critical shortage in those areas. So I think it's something that, it's not a marketing issue per se, but but overcoming barriers is a really important consideration for marketers, and our messaging and how we can support students who are in that situation.
Kathy, just while you're on that, I live in Shepparton in Victoria. In our local high school, they're offering sign-on bonuses of $80,000 for high school students. And that's if they'll come and work at the local school. That is a sign of the types of shortages we're at. Do you think we need to start looking at more bonded places and packaging options to get that full life cycle of study plus career across to equity cohorts?
That's an interesting one. And I think all of these things should be on the table for consideration. Of course, once again, there's a lot more that goes into a decision to be a teacher or a nurse. And there's been a lot of really bad publicity about working conditions for teachers and nurses, particularly during and post-COVID. That has had an impact on the demand for those courses. Like, obviously, they're two really big areas for ACU, but we're hearing from our market, we've still got a lot of students interested in them, thankfully, but we're hearing more about, do I really want to go into a career like that? What's the pay like? What's the mental health like? And all of those issues have had a really bad rap in the media, and quite a prominent rap in the media. And we see demonstrations all the time about poor working conditions. So I think that it's not, these are really complex questions and problems that we have as higher education institutions, we play a role in, but they're much bigger to solve than what we can solve on our own.
Dean, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with Kathy, and it reinforces what I said before, that, just access and money are certainly components of the decision, but they're not the only components. And those cultural and societal issues that, embrace all of us in one way, no matter where we live, they're really important to address as well. And just providing, an opportunity or an access to a university or a career path with an initial sort of, financial fill-up is not enough to hang on to people. So those, bonded positions or, those sort of things, they're mechanisms, I guess. But I think it also comes down to something else that Kathy also was talking about under another question, was around that sort of lifelong learning and opportunities to reconnect with the university and their educational aspirations. I think that's really important to keep people on a path, because you kind of, I feel you'd be reminded of why you were there. And, most of us are in our chosen professions because it speaks to us in some deeper way.
Now, Dean, there's another topic which I feel like the Accord, it certainly touched on, but it may not have been able to embrace as well, and that's AI. We're seeing, obviously, every university has to respond to TEXA by June with a basic, this is how I'm stopping students from cheating type of response. But we also are seeing a commentary across the world about how higher education is going to need to change. There's going to be need to change. There's the downside of cheating, but then there's huge upside in terms of transformation of the educational experience. And we could see students having conceivably a completely different degree experience and set of things to study and analyze in 5 years compared to now as a result of AI and what it can do. Do you think that is a problem, given that we're trying to solve this workforce issue with a 26-year window, but at the same time, AI is changing a lot in our world?
Yeah, I've actually just come from a Martech summit in Singapore last week, where AI, if it's a real word, was the most pronounced word of those couple of days. So it's really top of mind for everybody, not just our sector. And there's this dichotomy between those of us who want to use artificial intelligence, generative or predictive, whatever it might be, to make our businesses better, or our corporations or organizations better. And yet there's the customer, the client, the student in our case, who's using AI to filter out some of that. So there's this almost this contradiction in the way that AI is being used around the world. The thing I see right at the moment is it's a bit of a gold rush. There's, I've read somewhere recently, there's like 14,000 AI platforms available to anyone right now. And that's probably a week ago, so there's probably 28,000 by now. But
that's right.
There's a bit of a gold rush around this at the moment. And like any gold rush, if I use that analogy, there's going to be some, seams that really deliver and some that are just going to be barren dirt. And so I think we have to hasten slowly. Certainly, we're experimenting, we're diving in, we're responding to texts in that way in terms of the educational side of it. But I think it will find its level, and I think its level it'll be different. And I see it as a similar kind of seminal shift in the industry, like we saw, 30 years ago with the advent of online. I remember when I did my master's degree, online wasn't a thing at the start of it, and by the end of it, my final subject was internet advertising, I think it was called. So there's this big shift at the turn of the century around what can be delivered through the internet and what the internet was. And there was people who were naysayers, there were people who were early adopters, there were people who lost millions of dollars, people who made millions of dollars. I see that as a similar moment with AI. Now, it's not a fad because, looking back 30 years, the internet has delivered a global shift in the way we communicate and operate. And I think AI will do the same. But right at the moment, I think it's a flurry.
Kathy, what do you think about that? AI, we could talk for days on that alone, but AI and the Accord, is there a mismatch there?
Look, I think like Dean said, ACU is also responding to the TEXA requirements there, and universities do have to embrace AI. I was sort of thinking as you were talking, Dean, it's also an opportunity for us. Like, AI will impact prospective students and future generations of students as they go into work. How can we help ensure that we're producing graduates who understand the benefits of AI, as well as the risks, the ethics, the human factors, and how can we develop those kinds of skills so that the future AI, as it sort of generates, I suppose, we've got people who kind of understand the human element, like the things that AI cannot replace. And I think that's really important. Also wondering how it's going to impact our marketing as students are using AI increasingly, particularly international students, to find and choose universities. And how can we as marketers influence what the AI technology is picking up about us? Is it correct? I think it poses so many challenges and opportunities for us. It's quite exciting, but also a little bit scary.
Yeah, I agree, Kathy. And actually, that was going to be my next question. So I'm really glad you've touched on it. At the time when the internet came along, we found we could give everything to students. And what we heard back was students were overwhelmed and they weren't quite sure which direction to look in. It feels like AI has accelerated that process where there are even more content areas, but we have perhaps less trust or certainty on the content we're seeing. How are unis going to start to overcome that trust problem from the student point of view?
Yeah, it is a real challenge that we have. But despite all of the changes in how we go to market and all the fabulous digital tools we have available to us, and the fancy ways that we can market and sales activities and so on, all of that's great. But it's also the old school grassroots connecting with students in their communities, on campus, talking to the academics, talking to current students. There is still a place for all of that. And I think students are overwhelmed. As a parent of a recent Year 12 graduate, it is very overwhelming for them. And there is still a real role to play that we can play as marketers and recruiters in that outreach and connecting with students on a human level. I think there will always be a place for that. Often we hear, why do you still need to go out to schools? Why do you still need to do this? Can't you just do it all online? Well, yes, we are doing a lot of it online, but having a conversation, actually listening to the students' concerns or questions, and helping them to understand or navigate because it's a huge, like, we speak a different language almost in universities. Like, it's a lot that goes into those decisions. And I think that there will always be a place for that sort of engagement in the marketing mix.
A couple more questions coming through. Well, I'll go to both of you. Kathy first, is there a role for an independent third-party student advisory service?
Well, there are many of those. I think that the private businesses and so on are setting up, and I think that students do have access to that kind of thing if they want to. Like, many of them charge, but some of them don't. I think there definitely is a role for that. I mean, it's a big market. I think there's a place for all of it. But at the same time, I think we still have to play that role and bring, often it's quite a daunting proposition, going to university. And everywhere I've worked, and even when I worked in TAFE, like, bringing students onto the campus and familiarizing them with the environment, showing them the facilities, letting them talk to students and talk to academics. I think they're the types of things that help students, I guess, feel a little bit more comfortable, see themselves in that environment. And I think that is really important. And, who knows, we may need to be doing more work with those independent third-party student advisory services as well, because it's a big market that we need to cover. And I think, we're pretty stretched as it is. So, yes, I think there is a role.
Dean, your thoughts on that, the role of the independent party, and also the evolution of face-to-face versus digital?
Yeah, look, I think those third parties do play a very valuable role. I mean, if you look at school leavers, the career advisors that they go to, and all the expos and careers fairs that they're shunted along to in the school bus, that forms that purpose. And it probably needs to be a bit sharper, but it's certainly that exists as it currently stands. Similarly for international students and domestic and onshore international students. They go through an agents network, and those agents invariably have a number of universities that they deal with. So there is that advisory in that, and there's a natural incentive there to connect the the prospective student with the most likely institution, and that's where when you get that union, then people are happy to pay a commission on that, and either the student or the institution. There's probably a gap in the domestic market for that, because a lot of them are, commission driven, and they favour the institutions they deal with more frequently and that sort of stuff. And it may well be a role that the tax can start to play. I mean, the tax is starting to really question their relevance in a world of early offers and direct applications. So I think the tax could certainly start playing as those tertiary admission centres that we have in the past been the sort of the gatekeeper of the university offer. Perhaps they need to take more responsibility in that advisory role as well.
Another question that's through, Dean, I'll ask you this one. One of the recommendations of the Accord was to scrap the Job Ready Graduate Scheme and replace it with course fees based on student lifetime earnings, along with the simplification of the indexation process for HECS help loans. Jared from Flinders has asked this one. Do you have any thoughts on this, and if that fee model will impact degree choice? I likewise saw this one and I thought, how are they going to divine whether for example, in law, are you going to go and work in community law and earn peanuts, or are you going to learn in corporate and earn megabucks? How do you work that out? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the conversations and the publicity around the recent, hefty indexation of current HECS debts, the one thing that is really, really clear is that prospective students are looking for a simpler system, not a more complicated system. And I think the Job Ready Graduate Scheme was complicated. The lifetime earnings scheme is complicated. The ability to people to game it is certainly there. So I think a much simpler payment system for the prospective student is what we're looking for. I'd be very surprised if this recommendation was one that was carried through.
Do you think the changes, and also do you think the current level of indexation, that the 7% rises in HECS and so on, do you think they are impacting student choice at the moment?
In the context of cost of living, yes, 100% they are. In isolation, you could say, well, there's better years and worse years for any sort of level of enrolment. But in the environment of the last few years, and from all predictions the next few years, we have a Australian community that has got a real cost of living pressure. And if you've got a avoidable cost, then people will avoid it.
Kathy, if this all succeeds and we double the number of students that we have, what's the implication for marketing costs? Do you get economies of scale, or does it actually cost more because you have to spend more to attract in all those students who are currently not choosing to come and enroll here anyway? Where's that going?
Tim, I think I can't help but suspect that there will be additional marketing costs. ACU has 7 campuses plus a leadership centre in Townsville. To do every market justice, we need to understand the unique needs of that market and be highly targeted, and it stretches our budget even further. You've got to sort of look at obviously with digital, social media, BVOD, etc. We can get scale with all of that. We can measure ROI. That's only one piece of the puzzle, though. To do that deep engagement, the awareness raising, that is quite expensive. And a lot of that is above the line marketing, which is, more expensive and much more difficult to measure. So adding regions to the mix adds to the cost, without a doubt, particularly if we're all doing it on our own. And this is where I think, there's the opportunity for more collaboration. you know, each of us doing our own sort of campaigns or engagement strategies to go into a particular market, when you think about it, it kind of seems a bit crazy that we would do that. And why wouldn't we work together? Because, you know, there's a lot of universities offer different courses and different opportunities for students. So I think there is that opportunity for us. I think that sort of deep connection in rural, remote areas or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, etc., is absolutely critical to sort of shifting perceptions and shifting aspirations for further study. That costs more money. You've got to travel, you've got to, even when you're using student ambassadors, a lot of them don't want to do those trips, particularly on their own. So you're sending staff out. And so, yes, there are additional marketing costs with all of this. So I think that's an issue that we need to consider, and also an opportunity for us to think how we can collaborate more.
Well, while we're on that, Kathy, there's another question that's come in. It's really relevant to what you've just said. What would the additional funding need to look like? And what other external areas would we look at to get support? Federal government, state government, schools? You know, is it going to have to be a collaborative effort?
Yeah, I suspect so. I mean, we haven't actually, I don't think any of us have sat down to cost it out per se. Probably need to actually come together and consider this as a sector of a community of marketers. How are we going to tackle this problem together? Because I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of additional money coming from the government. And yeah, so potentially other funding sources, potentially looking at the money that is provided through the HEP program to support students once they get here, and with the outreach that happens there in the earlier years, but that's not for marketing per se, although indirectly it is, because it's raising awareness and aspiration. So there's an opportunity to look at how that could be perhaps better utilised. But yeah, I think it is, there's no one answer, there's no silver bullet answer to this either.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there as well, Kathy's 100% right. And I go back to my first point that just providing access and opportunity is not enough. What we're talking about here, if you're going to lift attainment rates and educational participation rates in parts of our community that have traditionally not participated, then you're talking about a shifting of behaviour and a shifting of belief. It's not just about saying, "Hey, the door's open." You know, it's that's a costly exercise, and it's a campaign of frequency and high touch, and it's hard graft. You know, you're not gonna get it with a highly polished video that's, you know, pumped out for 3 months. It's just, you know, it's a long term, it's a long fuse, this one, and it's hard graft, and it's high frequency, high touch, and it probably involves online and offline evangelism as well.
Absolutely agree. And so, Dean, have you seen a government campaign recently that fits this bill? Is the government able to make this happen?
Yeah, look, if I go back a few years around seatbelt campaigns and stuff like that, and drink driving campaigns, they were intense. They were looking for behavioural change. They were trying to reach parts of the community that were ignoring them. And you know, they for years, you know, those campaigns ran for years, and they were supported with driver safety campaigns at schools. They were supported by, you know, other defensive driving courses for experienced drivers. So there was a lot of, you know, if I'd say online or offline in that context. So yeah, there is a precedent there, but we're talking tens of millions of dollars.
And is the motivation as strong for such a thing for tertiary education as it is for, you know, things that are more life-threatening?
Yeah, you think not, probably.
Yeah.
So, what's the way? It actually sounds like we should be starting to work towards some sort of summit to bring together marketing staff to start to talk about these issues, because at the moment, I don't see the Accord doing it on its own.
Yeah, look, if I know that the financial position of a lot of universities is still very precarious at the moment, because some have been really hit by the downturn domestically over the last couple of years, and some are still really struggling with the return of international students, and others yet again have been sort of hit hard by the changes in the last 12 months or 7 months of visa approvals. So there's a lot working against the prosperity of universities right now. But and just use round numbers, if every university gave $1 million, you'd have enough to do this every year.
And do you think unis are going to be up for that?
No. But let's start. It's like a haggle, isn't it? So
yeah, no, absolutely. And it is also very useful in terms of saying, well, there's a quantum of money, $40 million per annum for a number of years, and the money's got to come from somewhere. Let's start to. So a very, very useful discussion. Now we're getting very close to time. There are many more areas we could dive into. Kathy, do you have any overall thoughts to sum up how we're placed? Are we ready for this?
No, to be honest, I don't think we are. I think the targets are very ambitious, dare I say, maybe even a little bit unrealistic. But I don't think anybody would argue with the intent behind them. I definitely think, this is a really important area, but I just can't see, like today, how would we be able to achieve that as, 40 individual universities? I think that we do have to potentially come together to talk about how we're going to approach it. Of course, we have to see what comes of it, like what the government response is and what is funded and what's not, and what the realities are. But I think it wouldn't be a bad use of our time if we were considering, if this was to happen, how might we collaborate?
Dean, any last words on that same topic? Are we ready?
Oh, look, I think the push in the Accord is for a shift in how education is delivered in Australia, and the skill set that Australia needs to aspire to, and the skills level Australia needs to aspire to over the next decade or more. I don't think marketing was considered, and a lot of these big picture documents don't consider marketing, but it's a reality that there are implementation costs and ancillary costs around that, and some really complex messaging that has to be crafted in a way that's effective to deliver on that aspiration. So I think the Accord could be seen as phase one, and then what elements of the Accord that then adopted, then I think we can start talking seriously about the implementation.
Fantastic. Well, it seems to me that we have material for many more discussions to come. Thank you so much for your time, Kathy and Dean. I've found this discussion really valuable, and I'm sure, judging by the number of questions coming through, that likewise the audience have. Apologies for any questions we have not got to, but we'll be sure to come back to this relatively soon. Really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bakes. See ya.
Bye.